Hello, welcome back. In this part, we're going to do something a little different and to go beyond the capabilities of the pivot table, see some of the deficiencies of a pivot table and how can we overcome it. And this is again related to my back and forth negotiation with this new sales manager, Lucy. Last time I showed her where we are, she actually said that there's another category, a whole category of types of analysis she's interested in. And it's very typical. I was not surprised. This is about comparing year over year. And so she wanted to see last year's sales, this year's sales, and the differences between those. Are we going up, down in each category, each geography, and so on. So I went back to my pivot to try and achieve this kind of analysis, and I encountered some limitations to the pivot table technology. And we'll see how can we together can work around them. So let's go to the Excel again. I created this pivot that has countries and categories nested. Notice this is previously we had like countries and state, categories and subcategories, but there's nothing wrong with having countries and categories nested below. There's no reason to only have the hierarchy of country and state. It could be any combination that makes sense for the purpose of this analysis. And I have on columns the year 2015 and 2016. Now the question is, how can I actually create a comparison between 2016 and 2015? We could go and look into calculated fields. It's going to be too hard and actually almost impossible. Usually what I find that people are solving this issue is by referencing the pivot from the outside, from a regular Excel formula. So I would try to say create another column here which is not part of the pivot, and this column will be, let's call it growth. So it's going to represent the growth between, hopefully it's the growth, sometimes it's going to be negative growth, between 2016 and 2015. So, and I'm going to reference this sales and see what will happen here. When I click on the cell of 2016, instead of saying like in a regular Excel formula, C3, it comes with this function called get pivot data. This was introduced way back as a way to actually reference cells in the pivot. So for the moment, I can go with it and try to understand it later. So I say this minus this, and I got a number, which is, actually, I did, it's actually negative in this case. Makes sense. And I can extend it. I can just double click here. And immediately see one of the problems with this get pivot data. When I dragged it down, so first of all, let's see what's good about this. So before we even extend it, let's see what's good about this get pivot data thing. It's a function that was created exactly for this purpose of referencing into a pivot. And it includes a reference to the pivot itself, saying what is the value saying and where is the anchor of the pivot. The pivot starts at A1, and it says show me the value for year 2016. The country is Australia, and here it says year 2015. So it's kind of logically referencing an area in the pivot. The good thing about it is that if I, for example, will go ahead and change the positions of those two, actually it didn't really maintain the, why is that? Because the whole idea of the get pivot data is that if I will, let's take it aside for a moment and let's put it here, that will have, and I will just introduce, let's say, the months after the, it's not enough space. Let's put something simpler, like the gender. So you see here that even though the whole pivot moved and there was the gender is now in the columns below the year, the value for the get pivot data here is still valid because it's still referencing the same cells and the same logical places in the pivot. So that's the idea of the get pivot data. But the disadvantage, as we saw before, is that when you try to drag it, it actually remains constant and it doesn't adjust to when you drag it down or across like a regular Excel function. So that's why it's really not very useful. So I can just try you can get rid of it altogether. You can go to the ribbon, the part of regarding the pivot table, and you can go to options here and uncheck the option for generating get pivot data. So now when I will go and click on this, it will just give me a regular reference, same number, remember. And now it actually works when I can say growth, and I can even calculate growth percent. And the growth percent, I would say this would be the growth divided by sales in 2015. So I see the difference as a percentage. Format this as a percent. Double click the corner here. And I see for each combination of country and category the percentage, and I can go ahead and add to it conditional formatting as we saw before. So all this is working pretty good, but this is very sensitive to any changes in the pivot. So even if I actually take it like I take this area and I just move it aside to make more space for it, or now if I try like I did before to take the gender column and introduce it for some reason, let's say I want the gender under years, everything breaks. So those references that were actually, this change in the pivot did not cause Excel to adjust the formulas in any way, and the formulas still are pointing to column C and B, but column C and B are now something completely different. So it's we have to be very careful when if we reference a pivot from the outside to any changes in the pivot. We cannot really change the structure of the pivot. Sometimes people actually do it differently. They copy also, they just reference all of the pivots. So they say, let's take this one and drag it across, drag it down like this, and also let's take the actual. So just copying everything aside to regular formulas to have a whole range of formulas instead of the original range. It's the original way that I did it was partly the pivot itself and partly like here. This is a good way, but you can see the numbers. For example, you cannot create a chart that is partly the pivot and partly the areas outside the pivot. So in order to create a chart, you will have to copy everything.